Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin Sunday. We have two great guests this evening. We have Jack Keane and Brent Bozell, two great patriots. Do you see what's taking place in Europe? Do you care? Do you wonder if it has anything to do with you? The anti-Semitic riot in Amsterdam? Israeli soccer fans speak out about horrific mob attack in Amsterdam, what Kristallnacht would have looked like. Kristallnacht was 86 years ago. It was viewed as the first aggressive step against the Jews by Hitler. Here we have first evacuated Israelis land in Israel from Amsterdam. Jewish leaders express horror. Stick with me, folks. Dutch king condemns anti-Semitic attack on Israeli soccer fans in Amsterdam. Assailants chanted Free Palestine. Here's one. The Intifada is globalized. All right, look. In 2009, I wrote a book called Liberty and Tyranny. That's 15 years ago by my calculation, long before there were ever talks about warmongers and neocons and isolationists and forever wars and all the rest. Sort of childish labels that are given to complicated issues of life and death, of war and peace. And here's what I said. I put the marker down right then in a book that was #1 on the New York Times bestseller list for 6 months, sold over 1.5 million copies, and to this day is the most popularly received book on conservatism in the last 15 years. Ensure, when it comes to foreign policy and security, ensure that all foreign policy decisions are made for the purpose of preserving and improving American society. Reject all treaties, entanglements, institutions, and enterprises that have as their purpose the supplantation of America's best interests, including its physical, cultural, economic, and military sovereignty, to an amorphous global interest. Ensure that America remains the world's superpower. Ensure that at all times America's military forces are prepared for war, to dissuade attacks, encourage peace, and if necessary, win any war. You see, this book and I were the first American firsters. This book helped launch the Tea Party movement in 2010. Now, the American firsters in the 1930s helped cause World War II. They helped disarm America. They made it impossible for us to support our British friends when they were under attack by the Nazis. They created a psychology and a political movement in this country led by Lindbergh, among others, that basically caught us off guard when we were attacked at Pearl Harbor. After we were attacked at Pearl Harbor, Lindbergh apologized. That movement completely collapsed, and he led the bond movement to raise as much money as he could so we could fight World War II. I don't think we'll make that mistake again, God willing. A warmonger. What's a warmonger? An isolationist. What's an isolationist? A neocon. I know what that is, a pejorative for Jews who support a strong military. A forever war. I guess the Revolutionary War was a forever war. It lasted over 7 years. But I know what's meant by all of this stuff. What's meant is sometimes we make stupid decisions about getting involved in wars we probably shouldn't be involved in, and they go on and on and on with commanders and presidents who don't seem to want to win them or don't seem to know how to win them. But there have been very long wars that were necessary wars that we fought for our own survival, for our own existence, for our own creation. So these terms don't mean a damn thing. But let's step back and take a look at what's going on in the world today, because I think it's necessary. The president's picking national security teams, and he's right. The test is what? Common sense. That's what he says all the time. And common sense means prudence, prudential decisions, good judgment. It doesn't mean running around with bumper sticker labels and accusing people of this, that, or the other thing. Either people are prudential or they're not. And if they're not, they really shouldn't have any cabinet position, or they shouldn't be a general at all. But let's take a look at what's going on in the world, because I don't think this is getting a hell of a lot of attention, and it needs it. Because the dark clouds of war are hanging over us. And at the same time, we're diminishing the ability of our military to defend us. North Korea is now in Ukraine, fighting alongside the Russian troops against Ukraine. North Korea now has an arsenal of nuclear weapons. For 40 years, the goal with Democrat and Republican presidents was to prevent North Korea from getting a nuclear weapon. And we gave them money, and we helped that regime to survive. We subsidized it. We gave them food when there was starvation. None of it worked. Iran is providing drones to Russia, advanced drones. Iran is providing oil to communist China. Russia is providing air defense systems to Iran. China is providing armaments to Iran. China and Russia have now signed military agreements with Iran. Iran now has the material to build nuclear weapons. Wow. China is building the most powerful military on the face of the earth. Well, we are degrading our military and not funding it properly. They now have the largest navy on the face of the earth. It has devoured Hong Kong without any pushback. It is going to invade Taiwan. It has told us it's going to in the next 3 or 4 years. We may not have the naval assets in and around the South China Sea to protect Taiwan. China is threatening Japan. Is that okay, too? They're threatening the Philippines, and they're threatening Australia. They're even threatening Vietnam. In Europe, it looks like the 1930s all over again. You saw what was happening in Amsterdam, and I'll tell you, by God, where the hell is the outcry by our leaders in the United States? Biden put out a statement, but where are all the leaders? They're chasing Jews in the streets in Europe. We've been there before. Just as Jews were chased in the streets of New York, in London. The chief rabbi in France says there's not going to be one Jew left in France in 10 years. The Jews are the canary in the coal mine. You think these forces, you think they'll be done when they're done abusing the Jews? Are they ever done? These are the same people who hate the West, the same people who hate America, us, we the people. The clouds are forming right in front of your eyes. There's no closing your eyes to this. There's no putting your head in the sand, because Europe is looking like the 1930s. And the axis of evil has formed. Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. They're working with each other. They're exchanging intelligence with each other. They're exchanging weapons with each other. They're helping strengthen each other. They're financing each other. And their number one enemy is us. The jihadist Islamists have migrated into Europe by the hundreds of thousands, if not the millions, changing the demographics of many European countries, especially the smaller ones, changing the culture, changing the politics of these countries in a completely significant way. It's a problem. In our country, Biden is said to be a warmonger by the isolationists. He's no warmonger. He's a coward. He's an appeaser. He surrendered Afghanistan. He surrendered it to the Taliban, which is now working with the communist Chinese and the Russians. He appeased Putin. He appeased him. That's why Putin invaded Ukraine. He saw Afghanistan. He saw Biden appeasing him. He invaded Ukraine. It wasn't because Biden's a warmonger. So Putin invaded Ukraine. And despite the billions and billions that have been poured into Ukraine, there were conditions, just like he puts conditions on Israel. You cannot win the war. You cannot go on offense. You have to fight a defensive war. So all these Ukrainians are slaughtered. 30,000 of their children are taken hostage into Russia to be raised by Russian families. Their women are being brutalized and raped. Now, I know there's a big contingent of people in this country who say, what does Ukraine have to do with us? What does Taiwan have to do with us? What does Israel have to do with us? What do the Philippines and Japan? Wow. That's crazy. One day we're going to look around, and this axis of evil will be more powerful than we are. They're going to have allies all over the world. They're moving into Central and South America. China is already. Russia is threatening constantly Alaska. You think Fort America can handle all this on our own? Then you don't know history. You don't understand how militaries work. It's crazy. But that doesn't mean we have to go to war with everybody. What did Donald Trump say? Common sense. And what does common sense mean? Prudence. You don't need to be ideological about this. Your eyes need to be wide open. You got to use your brain. You got to see what's going on. Biden is said to be a warmonger. He's an appeaser. He funded Iran. He funded the terrorists, directly and indirectly, because he was trying to appease Iran, trying to persuade Iran, he and Blinken and the other reprobates, giving them money, doing whatever they could to get them to what? To stop being Iran. Insane. That's not a warmonger. That's an appeaser. That's a coward. It's even worse. He's funding the enemy in order to try and buy off the enemy. It doesn't work with jihadists and Islamists. That's not what they're about. Israel is at war in part because of the Biden-Harris administration, Blinken, Sullivan, and of course, the jihadis and the Islamists. They're defending themselves. They're kicking their ass. Hamas, Hezbollah, they are prepared to take out Iran's nuclear sites. Who's stopping them? Mr. Appeaser. Biden says no. Israel would be done with Hamas. They'd be done with Hezbollah. Iran wouldn't even exist anymore. The people would have overthrown it if Israel had been able to do what it wanted to do. But no, Mr. Appeaser said no. So we're not even getting our bumper sticker labels right. Joe Biden's not a warmonger. He's a war provoker. That's quite different. And now we have Amsterdam. What, Mark? You know, it's as if it's not even happening with the silence in our country. And by both parties. I'm ashamed of it. Amsterdam isn't just a Jew thing. What's going on in the Middle East isn't just a Jew thing. What's going on in France isn't just a Jew thing. What's going on in New York and these universities, this isn't just a Jew thing. We've been here before. Anybody who knows even a summary edition of modern history knows we've been here before. The war against the Jews, I repeat, is the war against humanity. It's the war against the West, the civilized society. Our enemies are building up their militaries. They're strengthening their alliances. They're sharing intelligence. They're sharing resources. They're sharing armaments. They're fighting our allies. Ukraine, yes, it's an ally. Israel. Europe is weaker than ever before and getting weaker by the day. Our military is being underfunded and yet stretched by Mr. Appeaser. By Mr. Appeaser. We better wake up to what the hell's going on. And I'll put my marker down. We will be in World War III, whether we like it or not, in 5 or 10 years. If we don't start to act like a country that seriously is concerned about its security, about its national security, and our alliances with our allies. Not because we're warmongers. America's not a warmonger nation. The American people are not warmongers because I believe in America first, as I wrote in my book 15 years ago. All our actions should be taken because they're in America's best interests. Having enemies collaborate, share weaponry, share resources for the purpose, ultimately, of either attacking us or cutting off our economic avenues and navigable waters. That's not acceptable. It's simply not acceptable. 80 million people died during World War II. Almost 500,000 of our troops died during World War II. The movement before us being attacked at Pearl Harbor ensured that we were not prepared for that war. And it cost us an enormous number of lives until we could build up our resources, build up America's psychology, and do what had to be done. I thought this needed to be said. And I still don't hear people condemning what took place in Amsterdam. Not enough. More of it's going to occur. I want to address one other subject, the American media. I want to read something to you. The mood in Washington, the Washington press corps, is bleak, and deservedly so. It shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that with a few exceptions, we were all tacitly or even explicitly with her, meaning the other candidate, which has led to a certain anguish in the face of Donald Trump's victory. More than that, and more importantly, we also miss the story. After having spent months mocking the people who had a better sense of what was going on. This is all symptomatic of modern journalism's great moral and intellectual failing. Its unbearable smugness. Trump knew what he was doing when he invited his crowds to jeer and hiss the reporters covering him. They hate us. and have for some time. And can you blame them? Journalists love mocking Trump supporters. We diagnose them as racists in the way Dark Age clerics confused medical problems with demonic possession. Journalists, at our worst, see ourselves as a priestly caste. We believe we not only have access to the indisputable facts, but also a greater truth, a system of beliefs divined from an advanced understanding of justice. This is all a whitewash, you see. Trump voters, they're racist, they're sexist, so there must be more racists and sexists than we actually realized. Journalists increasingly don't even believe in the possibility of reasoned disagreement, and as such ascribe cynical motives to those who think about things a different way. As a direct result, we get it wrong with greater frequency. Out on the road, we forget to ask the right questions. We can't even imagine the right question. We go into assignments too certain that what we find will serve to justify our biases. That was written November 11, 2016, after the first Trump race. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the American media haven't changed and they won't change. Why? Because massive corporations, conglomerates, that aren't even really necessarily in the media news business, they own these companies. Paramount, it's an entertainment company. What does it own? It owns CBS. You have Comcast, a cable company that owns MSNBC and NBC. You have Disney that owns ABC and so forth down the lane. These are massive conglomerates. These little platforms, whether it's CNN or MSNBC, even the networks, they mean nothing to these big companies. So they don't police them. These are all publicly owned companies. Not a single one of these journalists, so-called, not a single one of these hosts are going to be held to account by that corporation and removed. Joy Reid will continue to have a primetime slot on MSNBC where she spews her bigoted bias, her poison, endlessly. The whole lineup at MSNBC, most of the lineup at CNN, same thing. They're not going to change because their stripes don't change. And unless these massive corporations, these conglomerates, take steps to clean up what's coming out of the mouths of so many of these hateful so-called journalists, it's not going to happen. They all live in the same communities. They're of the East and West Coasts, and they do not have access to and don't want access to what the American people are thinking. That's not what American press is supposed to be about. They are propagandists. And I will pursue this more later in the program with Brent Bozell. We'll be right back.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.